Hi, folks. It's been a while since we've reached out through our Beyond Betrayal program. And Karen gave me a little prompt actually yesterday and said, "Hey, when are we going to do this again?" And you know, my my life has been a little bit chaotic. That my wife has had a hip replacement surgery, and so that has really taken up a lot of kind of my time. But she's doing well. Thank you for thinking about us and praying for us, all the folks that have. And so we're excited about her progress. She still has a ways to go because the other surgeries are coming up downstream. But we have at least gotten this one hurdle behind us, and she's thrilled with the results. We're going to be talking here today about how to move forward after you feel cheated by life, others, or God. And that's really what our Beyond Betrayal program is all about. And we want to give you some practical tips on finding the way forward after you've been hurt. And so we're going to be talking about that in just a minute. We'll be right back. Darren, what's happening?
Not much. What's happening with you?
Not much. I haven't talked to you for a while. And that and so you're rocking a whole new hairdo, so that's looking great.
Yeah, I'm trying to grow out my gray. Well, actually, my white. I'll have to say, I get my white hair from you.
Well, I got my white hair from my
You have
mom.
you have given me all these white hairs.
I know. Yeah. Well, what comes around goes around or whatever it is. And so, you know,
Yeah.
I'm glad at least I can pass something along to you that is
Oh,
of
yeah.
value, you know. So,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
passage of scripture in the book of Proverbs that says that gray hair is the glory of the aged, I guess. And it says that they get it from living a righteous life. So there, you know.
All
So
right. It's like shining through a little bit. I got a little bit of righteousso right there.
just a little bit. So just think of how far ahead of the game I am from you. So,
Yeah.
so all
If
right.
if you diet white though, then you're self-righteous.
Yes, exactly. It may be the case. you know. So okay, well, enough of this nonsense. Let's just go ahead and we'll get going on here today. And as you saw just a little bit ago, I had a quote from Henry Cloud that was posted there, but I want to also post the meme. I saw this on one of my Facebook, um, what do you call it? Facebook, oh, yeah, pages the other day.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so, hey, I'm going to see if I can switch to a different microphone. I want to see if this one works better. There we go. So, and this is my favorite microphone anyway, and so hopefully it's coming through a little bit better. So,
Yeah, a
but
little less tinny.
huh? A little less tinny.
It's a little less tinny. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. So here's the meme that I saw the other day, and it says, "You can't move forward in life if you keep holding on to what's behind you. If you keep holding on to what's behind you," and then
Mhm.
Dr. Henry Cloud also posted this comment. He says, "Healing and growth happen when you let go of the past and embrace what's ahead, even if it feels uncomfortable." Tell me some of your
Mhm.
thoughts about that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that that's definitely that's true. I've found that that's true too. Like when I've gone through things that are that I've wrestled with and struggled with, I um, feel like I can't move forward until I deal with those issues. And
Hmm.
so it does kind of keep you stuck when you're when you're focused on your past. And uh, I think there's some value in like looking back at your past, like if you're looking back at it so that you can see like, oh, God brought me through this. But to be
Mm,
dwelling in it, doesn't really allow you to be able to move forward and
yeah,
make progress.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, and I think that there's a value in looking back on the past, particularly with respect to doing maybe a post mortem on what has gone in the past, and thinking in terms
Hmm.
of lessons learned and
Hmm.
things that I could have done better, how I can leverage this for growth, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that looking back to the past is valuable from that respect. And yeah, so let's talk a little bit about moving forward, because I
Hmm.
deal with so many people who are stuck
Yeah.
that and it's interesting to me because life is always going to deal something is always going to come up in life that is going to
Hmm.
be a hurt or a disappointment, a betrayal or whatever. And and oftentimes it's a big thing, and in
Hmm.
the aftermath of that big thing, then folks, a lot of people just get stuck, you know,
Yeah.
and they can't
Yeah.
seem to move on. There are
Hmm.
some very practical tips to moving forward, and I'm going to share maybe 3 or 4 of them here.
Hmm. Yeah.
One is that in order to move forward, we're going to have to grieve,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this a lot before. But what's the difference between grief and sadness?
So, sadness um, is an emotion versus like grief is like a process.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that works, but yeah, sadness is um, well, let me think how to say this succinctly, but well,
Well,
grief.
let me jump in and offer. Let me offer you
Thanks for
something.
asking me a
Sorry,
question.
let me offer this. And I've heard it put this way before, is that grief is the sadness that cures sadness.
Hmm.
So, you know, sadness oftentimes just is something that is perpetual,
Yeah.
but grief cures our sadness. And Jesus himself said this in Matthew chapter 5, verse number 4. And he
Hmm.
says, "Blessed are those who mourn," or those who grieve, "for they will be comforted." Now, he doesn't say that we're blessed if we're sad, but he
Hmm.
says that we are blessed if we grieve. Now, you are 100% right that grief is a process, but learning how to navigate that process, I was never taught that. I had to learn how to do that. And there
Yeah.
are very few people that I know that were taught how to grieve their losses in
Hmm.
life. And so as a result, they end up getting stuck. And and grief is really about taking a look at the unwanted circumstance in our life, whether it's a death or divorce or unfaithfulness or disease or something mean somebody said to you or whatever it is. It's taking
Hmm.
that, and most people ruminate on the event, and rather than learning to look at and to examine the loss that has occurred as a result of that. And I think that grief, in all honesty, I think that grief is best managed in community, either a community with a therapist or coach, or a group that understands the grieving process. So
Yeah.
and we can elaborate on that in another broadcast, but we're not going to go too much deeper on that today. But there is a big difference between between you know, the hurt and identifying the hurt. Nobody has any problems doing that. Versus
Mm-hmm.
examining the loss.
Mm-hmm.
And the two are not the same. They're related, but they are not the same. So another step that I believe that is fundamental in order to make progress on this is forgiveness. I believe that forgiveness is the last stage of grief. And when we
Mm-hmm.
have, and particularly if it has to do with a relationship that that we really haven't grieved until we have forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And and people always ask me about, well, what about this? What about that? And I think that forgiveness is always the appropriate response to any offense or hurt. Always. There's no exceptions to it. Now, people get confused because they think they're confused. And by the way, if you jump over to our New Destiny Coaching YouTube channel, we have a whole series on forgiveness. Actually, we have two playlists on forgiveness at the New
Mm-hmm.
Destiny Coaching YouTube channel. So, but forgiveness, when it's done properly, is the way to freedom. And so that's and Jesus himself once again says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will obtain, or they will receive mercy." I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about two other aspects here, but before I do, I want to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah. Um, no, I like what you said about grief and forgiveness. I think that those are really um, huge as far as being able to move forward. Is uh, Another thing that I think about that I've found personally is when moving forward, it's like um, I have to get to a place where I can take the wound and be able to kind of like categorize it, or uh, figure out, like, it's like my brain won't stop working on a problem
Mm,
until it makes sense,
yeah.
but a lot
So
of
the
things
lesson
just
learned, you know.
a lot of things just don't make sense, though. Like when you're going through grief or going through a really rough time, uh, it a lot of times it's because that thing just completely blew your mind. Like it was
Yeah.
out of left field, like almost incomprehensible.
Yeah.
But to be able to get to a point, and usually for me that's through therapy, is and talking through things to be able to process that and find my way forward on that.
Yeah.
I had a youth leader a long time ago that was on the SWAT team, and he said um, that this was kind of like a little analogy that he was using with driving, is that when you're driving along, whatever direction you're looking at, that's the direction you're going to be heading towards. So if you're like looking to the side, you're going to start veering off to the side as you're driving, because that's where your focus is. And if we're focusing on the past, then we're not going to be able to move forward, because
Yeah.
we're not even being present. We're just being past focused,
Yeah.
instead of focusing on what might be ahead for us or what might be next. You know,
Yeah.
I read this
Yeah.
verse. I read this verse. I'm just going to read it real quick. It's from Proverbs 4:25 through 27. And it says, "Let your eyes look straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you, give careful, oops, I have to scroll, give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's good. Here's a couple other things, and thank you for sharing that passage. Where was that again? Proverbs 4 what?
20, give me 1 second. 25 through 27.
Okay. So here's a couple other things that I want to just touch on before we wrap up, and I want to just close out here in a few minutes, is that that one of the things I just got back from, I've been helping a man who has terminal cancer, and I take him to his doctor appointments, and there's a lot of doctor appointments for him to go to. He doesn't really have too many people in his life who can shuttle him to his appointments. And I sit in, and he's completely fine with that. And I sit in with him when the doctor talks to him about his circumstances and all. There's two doctors who were meeting with him today, and he's not a Christian. He doesn't share a Christian perspective, and so between the doctors, between them coming in and all, I asked him, I said, if there is a heaven, do you think you'll go there? And he began, talking to me about his thoughts along those lines. And he was really struggling once again with somewhat of believing in God because all of these horrible things that have happened to him.
Yeah.
This is typical. But, if you stop and think about it, is that what's our expectation? And that's an important question to ask. Is what is our expectation of life? Are we because I know wonderful Christians who have had horrible cancer and died from it.
Yeah.
So what's our expectations of life? With respect. And so where I'm going with this is that in order for us to move forward, I think that the only way that we can move forward in a healthy way is by moving forward with God. But the problem is that a lot of people get stuck because they have the expectation that God should have to shield them from the hurt that they've experienced. Whether, and I know Christians who have been raped. I know Christians who whose loved ones have been murdered. I know Christians who have had horrible diseases, and so and all sorts of kind of problems. So part of the reason why we get tripped up with our thoughts about God is that we have the expectation that somehow from this broken world we are supposed to get better than what it gives.
Yeah.
I've struggled with that a lot, and I'm just going to say this really quickly with respect to that, is that I finally began to see my way out of that problem when I began to realize that my big protest with God is that he hasn't made earth heaven.
Yeah.
But the other big problem, the other way that we can move forward with God is first of all, is like maybe recalibrating our expectations of what we're going to get from this life. This life is never going to give me all that I would hope to receive from it because it just doesn't work that way. The second thing is that when I trust in God, I'm really saying that this is a bad that happened to me. Was a horrible evil that happened to me, but I believe in your capacity to redeem this evil in my life. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean he turns the evil into a good. But what it does mean, I had another guy reach out to me the other day, and I've been working with him, and he's going through a horrible situation in his life. And And he said, well, what's the purpose of life? And I knew the context in which he was asking the question, because his life is upside down.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if the purpose in life is to become a wounded healer? What do you think? And he never responded to my question. I texted that. And what that means is that to be a wounded healer means that we have experienced the pain,
Mm-hmm.
but we've gone through that pain, and we now have committed our lives to helping others to navigate those types of that type of trauma. You
Yeah.
know, so 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 I think that in order to move forward, we have to, if I can connect the dots here, is that we need to grieve, we need to forgive, but I also think that we need to recalibrate our expectations of what we're going to get from this life. But then we
Mm-hmm.
also need to embrace the call to be a
Mm-hmm.
wounded healer, not just a survivor, but someone who has gone through the process and they have come out on the other side, and we can show others the way. So
Yeah.
now we
Yeah.
only have like a couple minutes or a minute or so left, and so thoughts along those lines before we wrap up.
Yeah. So I mean, I think like this life we're and when I'm reading the scriptures is that this seems to be a repeating pattern is like you're going to face tests, trials, and temptations,
In this world, you will
and
have
how
problems. Yeah,
yeah, and how you handle those are obstacles that are things that are like how you handle those situations and how you handle those determine where what your eternity is going to look like. And so you if you handle those by trusting God and following his ways, then your reward will be heaven.
yeah,
um, if you handle those tests, trials, and uh, temptations poorly, then your consequence is going to be hell.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so
And I think that
yeah,
you're absolutely right that from an eternal perspective, ultimately that's the one that counts, but also just from time. So not just eternity, but also in time. How we handle our problems determines whether or not we're going to become bitter, whether or
hmm
not that we are going to be victorious, whether or not we're going to
hmm
have true joy and peace in our life. Jesus
hmm
says this, and he's either blowing smoke or he's really can deliver. He says this, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full.
hmm
And that
yeah,
means not only in eternity, but also this side of eternity, a life with Christ is as good as it gets.
yeah.
You know?
And we look at other people's lives, and we all compare so much to
Yeah,
other people and everything, and we think, oh, they have a good life because they're rich, they're this,
yeah,
they're that,
yeah,
and and um we think, okay, they got it so good, but really, like Jesus says, it's going to be easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than a
yeah,
rich man to fit or to enter heaven. And so um, that's their test and their trial. What are they going to
yeah,
do with the blessings and the good things that they've been given? How are they going how are they going to manage that?
yeah,
And so, you know, um, nobody goes through life without tests and trials, but your tests and trials might look like things you would rather have. Somebody else's tests and trials might look like something you'd rather have than what
yeah,
you have.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I enjoyed this opportunity to connect with you, and we're going to try to get some more of these broadcasts produced. But it's important to kind of like consider this idea that you can't move forward in life if you keep holding on to what's behind you. Let me go ahead and wrap up here, and then we will connect afterwards, Karen. So once again, folks, thank you for taking some time to be with us today, and to think some of these thoughts about how we can make kind of make it through the biggest challenges in our life in a victorious way. And we really want to help you to do that. And we have a Facebook group where we reach out to folks routinely, and it's on Facebook at beyondbetrayal.org. Make sure you put in the entire name there, beyondbetrayal.org, and you can find us on Facebook and join us there. And hopefully that you'll discover the blessings of some of our resources and connections that we offer to those in the group. So that's it for